As an atheist who doesn't believe in God, I've looked a long time for a horror movie that doesn't incorporate Christian elements, or if it does incorporate Christian elements, makes it so that Jesus or God is the bad guy. Because God really is a piece of shit deity. He's done some horrible shit. So, I'm looking for this horror movie where God is the bad guy. And, it's hard to find, because all the popular monsters, Draculas and Wolfmen, and, they're all related to Satan and the occult. And it's like, when are we going to see Jesus destroying a city instead of, a demon? And that's when I found it, God Told Me To, by Larry Cohen. So, let's check it out. So, Larry Cohen is a name you might not recognize, but he's behind It's Alive, which, much like John Carpenter's They Live, has a very generic title. But It's Alive is the one with the demonic baby. God Told Me To, how to describe it? Well, it's a very weird movie, and it looks like a much smaller budget movie than it is. I mean, given its director and his repertoire, you'd think it would look a lot better than the final result does. It really doesn't look that good, but the concept is what makes it interesting. Because in the 70s you have a lot of religion-based type horror. You have The Exorcist and you have The Omen, both of which I've seen, both of which I really like, despite me being an atheist. I don't believe in demonic possessions. I don't believe in the Antichrist, but The Exorcist and The Omen are probably two of the scariest movies you're ever likely to see. And yes, The Omen does beat Neil Gaiman's shitty parody Good Omens any day of the week, hands down, no contest. But God Told Me To takes that tired old formula of the demonic possession or the spoopy Antichrist child and says, what if God is actually an alien mutant with a mouth in his stomach? What then, right? And, that's just the best shit right there. As an atheist, I'm like, heck yeah, finally, making God the bad guy. Good on you, Larry Cohen. So the premise is really nice. It's just kind of like, the script is just like, and the cinematography, like some of the cinematography is nice, but there's just a lot of ideas that really don't get delivered on. Like, the 70s were an okay decade for horror, all things considered. You have Stephen King starting out with Carrie, which is arguably one of his best books. You got It's Alive, you got The Exorcist, like I said. All things considered, there's no reason why God Told Me To shouldn't have been, like a smash hit, because the premise is really fun, and you can do a lot of things with it, and, I have mixed feelings on it, I'll say that. So basically the plot is that there's this guy, Nicholas, spelled with an H. By default, I don't trust Nicholas's spelled with an H, because they're always shifty, and you can't trust them, so right off the bat I don't like this protagonist very much, but okay, it is his surname. I had no idea Nicholas with an H was his surname, but alright. Anyway, so he sees a guy committing a mass shooting at the top of a building, and then he wakes up, and it was a dream. And he has a girlfriend, I forget who she's his mistress, because he's married. And that's a major plot point. And you really can't sympathize with the guy. He is a huge cheater. He's not a very sympathetic character. I mean, he's well acted. The guy who plays him is just really good. But he's just kind of a not that great a guy. He's cheating on his wife. I mean, come on. I know it was the 70s, but dude. But anyway, there's a lot of stuff about mass shootings. I really like that, because this was ahead of the time, This was 20 years before Columbine. You already have stuff about mass shootings. It's very provocative of Mr. Cohen, and, it's just very interesting to see an event that really didn't get much news coverage finally covered. And in fact, This movie talks a lot about how such events oftentimes could be avoided, or how such events, don't get much news coverage because the police want to keep it under wraps. And, I kind of miss those days because I am sick of hearing about mass shootings on the 24-hour news cycle. It gets really old. But at the very least, the public has a right to be informed about that sort of thing. I don't know, it's very interesting in its depictions of the mentally ill. I'll say that. And that it gets religion correct. It portrays religion as a mass delusion where everyone will just do anything that this big magic sky daddy tells them to. And I think, a lot of mass shootings are religiously motivated. So to see this movie tackle that, I'm like, yes, finally, a movie that addresses the actual issues instead of avoiding them and blaming it on demons or something. It wasn't Satan, it was God. Because if this guy didn't believe in God, he wouldn't be out here killing people, because he wouldn't believe in any of this nonsense, That's really great. I really like that. There's a lot of religious iconography in this movie. The main character is a fervent Catholic, and there's a point where he's at a carnival, and carnival scenes are always fun, because carnivals can be really creepy. And he sees this fake church, and he gets down and prays, and it's very dramatic. It's the shot's really nice. The bit where he leaks the story to the press, the newspaper guy is really likable, really good actor. I really like that. Like I said, mixed feelings on this movie all around, because some parts are like so good, and some parts are like, it's really a mixed bag. So there's a flashback to the 50s. And in this flashback, you see this guy driving alone at night, and then suddenly he sees this naked woman in front of him. And yeah, sure, the nudity is kind of gratuitous, but she just got abducted by aliens, so alright. I'm an adult, I can handle breasts on screen. So she comes out naked, and he gives her a cloth or something, I forget. The flashback is really fake, like, the guy tries putting on this fake-ass 50s accent. I honestly don't get it why the 70s had such a hard time making movies about anything that was in the 50s, even though they were only like 20 years after. And now, there's some really accurate type stuff that's set in the 50s. And I believe I said this in my Forrest Gump review, but for the longest time, the 20th century had a hard time, looking back at the past and having accurate representations of the past, until, of course, the 90s came along and we entered postmodernism. But until then, it was really a toss of the coin. And God Told Me To is just a great example of period inaccuracy, total anachronism. The scene that's set in the 50s. This guy has the fake 50s haircut, and he's talking in this fake 50s voice, and it's like, geez Louise, we get it, it's the old days. And this flashback is in black and white. But then there's another flashback later in the movie, and this one's in color? So I don't get it why one flashback's in black and white, meaning it's in the old days, and then the second one isn't in black and white, even though it's set around the same time frame. That doesn't really make any sense. But I looked at the Wikipedia page for it, and apparently the second flashback incorporates stock footage taken from the Martin Landau show Space 1999. Space 1999 might be a show that you've never heard of, but its assets are repurposed all the time. For instance, I think the communicators from Space 1999 were reused in some other thing. I forget what, but... So the flashbacks aren't the best part. Definitely not the best part. Also, there's a mystery in the movie. It's supposed to be a mystery, but you can kind of tell what it is right from the beginning. There's some kind of malevolent entity. He's telling these people to do this stuff, and he's calling himself God. Pretty basic stuff, and that's what it turns out to be. Then again, maybe Mr. Cohen isn't going for a Twilight Zone type twist, and that's perfectly okay. Not everything's got to be a twist. The Wikipedia page describes it as a police procedural. Okay, I'll go with that. It's kind of a police procedural. I don't know why it's gotta be that. It could just be a straightforward horror, but you know, whatever. There's one part where the main character, he just kills a black guy with his telekinesis, and I really like the depiction of the ghetto in this. It seems very authentic, and obviously Mr. Cohen tried to capture some of the racial tension of the time. This Tom fellow just straight out murders a black guy, so by that point maybe the audience isn't supposed to sympathize with him anymore because he's become this horrible person with just a malevolent like bitterness that's just been growing in him. And like I said, he is a big cheater, and he just cheats on his wife, and it's like, why? She seems nice, you know? Why you gotta cheat on your wife? You know, just, I don't get it, but, you know, alright. And then by the end, he gets committed to a mental hospital, which I think is the most cliche ending that the movie could have gone with. He should have just died at the end. Why's he gotta survive, you know? He shouldn't survive, you know, but at least he's going off to the loony bin, and he'll be you know, persecuted for his crimes, because, I mean, he is a murderer, and not just of the evil space alien, but also of, you know, like, just some random black guy who, you know, okay, did threaten him, but that's because he was in the hood, and he shouldn't have gone there, you know? That's their hangout spot, and, you know, he's just kind of and he's just trying to test his psychic abilities, which, like, yeah, you could just do that with, like, an inanimate object. You don't gotta kill anyone. Like, jeez. But the cinematography in this scene is really nice. And again, I don't think the movie is trying to have us be sympathetic with this character at this point. It is trying to portray this guy as kind of broken and twisted. So I guess there's that aspect to it. The most interesting factoid about God Told Me To is that, along with Taxi Driver, it's one of the last movies Bernard Herrmann ever scored. You know Bernard Herrmann. His music's the shit. He did Cape Fear. He did Twilight Zone. Every epic Twilight Zone soundtrack, you know, is by Bernard Herrmann. And of course he does Taxi Driver, which is just the most bomb sauce soundtrack ever made. It's so good. So then God Told Me To had the soundtrack from Bernard Herrmann, which would have made the movie way better, because it's so good, you know. Bernard Herrmann, you can't go wrong with Bernard Herrmann. But he died, and from what I understand, he had finished the score. So Larry Cohen should have just used Herrmann's score. You know, even if the guy was dead, if his music was put in a cool horror movie like this posthumously, that'd be the best way to respect him. But instead, he just asked some other guy, and then that guy's like, nah, and then he goes to some other guy. So the music the movie ends up with is this lame-ass Gregorian chant. Sounds medieval-ish, you know, just like The Omen. So it's so lame. The music in this movie is really lame, and that's just so sad considering Bernard Herrmann could have done the music. What a flippin' shame. What an absolute gosh darn. Just like, what? It could have been so much better. And again, a lot of people say this is the scariest movie you've never seen, or it's on a list called the 10 scariest movies you've never seen. Or, you know, it's a very obscure horror movie. What I would say, though, is that it was forgotten because it just barely missed the mark. And if it had had that score from Bernard Herrmann, it could have been so much more well-remembered. It could have been as well-remembered as It's Alive or any of Larry Cohen's other films. It could have attained legendary status. You know, nothing else would have needed to change. Even the ending where he gets sentenced to the mental institution, just put Bernard Herrmann's score in there. It would have been awesome, but didn't happen. And I think that's why this movie is not very well known, and that's kind of sad, you know, because clearly a lot of passion and thought went into it. and Larry Cohen tried to create an interesting story with religious and societal themes, and you don't see enough conscious horror these days, and I think that's something the 70s did really well. The poster says it will give you nightmares forever, which is a little exaggerative. Okay, maybe if you're 12 or something, or you scare really easily, this movie could give you nightmares forever. But I think it's a lot more interesting in terms of what it has to say about religious conviction and the lengths that some people will go to appease their non-existent deities. The idea behind it is that none of these murderers are mentally ill, or at least not mentally ill as defined by the American Board of Psychology, because the American Board of Psychology doesn't define religion as a delusion. So these people are just religious, I guess, according to the American Board of Psychology, who for some reason don't define religion as a delusion, which it absolutely is. If your magic sky daddy is telling you to go out and shoot a bunch of people, it's time to, start taking your meds. But, again, this movie has so much interesting stuff to say, and it's just a real shame that it doesn't quite pack the punch that it should, because it's just such a darn good movie. Like, from an atheist point of view, I flippin' love this shit. I love how Larry Cohen tries to give a scientific explanation for what God is. It's just so cool. And at the end, when Bernard Phillips, the Mad Manson family cult leader, is like, hey, you want to have sex with me and we'll have a bunch of alien babies and we can conquer the world? And he opens up his stomach. I'm like, yes, this is what Christianity is. It's great. Some of the stuff just doesn't deliver, like how he gets committed to a mental institution by the end, even though we know he's not crazy, and if anything, he should be treated as the victim of like an explosion or something. And also, if he has mental powers, defeating Bernard Phillips, or whatever his name is, that won't make his mental powers go away. He's still genetically enhanced with those mental powers. And, he could just use them and prove that he's not crazy. It wouldn't be that hard. I guess maybe by that point he is crazy, but it just doesn't make... It's a shitty ending, like I said. One thing I think this movie really, really should be credited for is the just classic trope of, there's a main character who has these powers, and then the bad guy has the same powers, but, slightly different. You see it in Harry Potter. I honestly think this movie invented this trope, because I haven't seen it in any movie before this. You have Dark City, of course, where in the end the main guy defeats the Watchers with his magic psychic powers, and he's like, you invented me, and now I'm going to take you down with my mental powers. And then you got, Voldemort and Harry Potter battling it out. And I think this is a trope that's very common these days, but I think this movie invented it. I honestly do. I think this is the first time I've seen this kind of thing in any movie ever, so that should be said. I'm not saying that's a bad trope. I'm not saying it's something I hate. It can be done pretty well, as in Dark City. And I do think this movie invented that, which is really interesting. The main character's human genes are dominant, whereas the other guy's alien genes are dominant, so they're very different. It doesn't make any sense really as to why the aliens would... The motive of the aliens doesn't really make much sense. You'd think that they just drop more than 2 youngsters. I don't know. There's really not that many plot holes in this. Except, like I said, the mystery is kind of weak. Like, yeah, obviously this woman gets abducted by aliens. She's impregnated by the aliens. She gives birth to a scary mutant alien baby. We get it. We get the whole picture. You can piece pretty much the whole story together in like the first half hour. With the possible exception of that he's an alien too. I guess you wouldn't see that coming, because, he does seem pretty humanish. And also, I do feel that the movie could just use a more likable protagonist. There isn't really anyone you can latch onto, because the main character is just kind of a jerk, and he's kind of shitty. But I think the movie is very gutsy to take a risk like that and say, look, our main character's a piece of shit. Sure, he's trying to save all of humanity, but he's also like a serious piece of shit who just murders random black guys and cheats on his wife and shit. And that's interesting. I think Larry Cohen absolutely took a risk there, and the end result is a pretty interesting main character, albeit an awful guy. But the guy who plays him is really, he's got such range and talent. So yeah, I'll say that. God Told Me To is a movie with a lot of great acting, some really nice shots, and some good special effects. When Bernard Phillips walks on screen and he's glowing, it's pretty cool. And he's like Jesus, it's the Jesus symbolism is so heavy. Larry Cohen just slithers it on there like maple syrup onto a stack of pancakes, and I'm like, oh heck yeah, keep it coming. Keep shitting on religion, because I'm an atheist and that's what I do. Keep it coming, baby. So anyway, yeah, I really like this movie, and I think this movie needs to be appreciated more. I think this movie tried something no other movie has tried before or since, which is to make an anti-Christian horror film. And that's really something, that's something I haven't seen since, and that's really a shame, because God in the Old Testament is like the craziest, most vile, horrible demon that anyone has ever summoned. He's like this giant genocidal monster. So when are we gonna see that in a movie? I'm sick of seeing all the cool gods like Paimon and Odin and Thor and the Greek ones and all that. I'm sick of seeing all the cool gods like the African ones and the Middle Eastern ones and the Zoroastrian ones, the Persian ones, the Chinese ones. I'm sick of seeing all the cool gods getting all the villain roles in these horror movies. Meanwhile, Allah or Yahweh or God gets off scot-free. What's up with Jehovah just being immune from being a murderous deity? I like Hereditary. I hear Midsommar's nice. But when are we gonna start making Jesus the bad guy? When's demonic Jesus gonna fall out of the clouds and he holds up his hands and he's like, I'm going to kill everyone, right? Okay, maybe Jesus wouldn't do that, but you bet that Old Testament God would. The guy is a murderous lunatic. The amount of people he kills in the Old Testament is bonkers. He turns Lot's wife into a pillar of salt. What if, here's a premise for a movie. What if God turns people at random into pillars of salt, just at random? They're just walking down the street and all of a sudden they're just salt, and then people just use them to season their food or whatever? Because, everyone's turning into salt and they're running out of food, so they're like, darn, I guess we'll have to use this salt because it's the only thing that'll make our food taste good. That would be awesome. I'd watch that 1,000,000 times if that came out. No, I'm not going to make that movie. Someone else make that movie. I've made enough gosh dang movies. It isn't to say I'm not going to make any movies in the future, but someone else needs to make that movie. I'm sick of coming up with all these awesome ideas and nobody uses them. But yeah, anti-Christian horror movies are absolutely not done enough. I think Hereditary was kind of a step in the right direction. It was about self-acceptance, and at the end the kid learns that he's the seventh Satan, and his family is all demons, and he has this rich satanic heritage, and he's like, screw it. What the frick? I'm gonna embrace that, I'm not a Satanist, so, nothing really for me there, because I don't care about Satan. He's just a made-up magic, magic sky daddy too. But at least that movie was kind of about self-acceptance. And if you don't think it was about self-acceptance and you just think, that was a sad ending. It's not that sad. He was Satan. Anyway, this isn't a review of Hereditary. This is a review of God Told Me To. Just a great movie. Go watch it. Like I said, it has its flaws. It has its obvious, like, what were they thinking moments. It has its could have been so much better moments. I want this to be better, but somehow it's not better. It has those moments. But overall, just, I would agree, it is an underrated movie, even if maybe it deserves to be underrated because it made some pretty bad choices all in all. It's underrated, and I think you should watch it, at least give it a try, and if you don't like it, that's perfectly understandable. It's not the best horror movie, not the scariest horror movie, but it's a horror movie that tries, and these days that's a rare thing to come across. Definitely check it out. Anyway, that's my review of God Told Me To. Hope you enjoyed. If you like these reviews, then send in and get some Nicholas comics. If you're a big horror fan, I recommend Dog Liker. It's a classic. Write to Nicholas Cicada, 1424 Columbine Street, number 1, Denver, Colorado, 80206. Ask for our full catalog. That's how I make the money. That's how I keep these reviews pumping out. Heck, maybe I can buy some fun props for future reviews. Until then, I'm just sitting in this blank void of nothingness, waiting for me to be able to buy some resources so I can make my videos better. If you're currently, using Patreon and paying someone else, but I don't have a Patreon. I get my money from selling comics through the mail, because that's how you do it like a boss. Anywho, I'll see you on the next one, suckers.